Hey everyone and welcome. In this lesson, we are going to begin creating our balloon popper game. So to begin, we need to go ahead and create ourselves a brand new Unity project. Here inside the Unity Hub, we can go over to new, and I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to call this one, let's just say we're going to have Unity Micro Projects, all right? Make sure it is a 3D template. You can choose a location where you want to save your project files to, and then we can click create to, of course, create the project and open up the Unity editor. Okay, so here we are inside of Unity. Now the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new folder here inside of our project browser, and this folder is going to be called Balloon Popper, okay, because we are going to be creating various different projects in this course. The first one, of course, being the balloon popper. So we're going to make an individual folder for each just to organize them a bit easier. And then inside of the balloon popper folder, we are going to create a new scene for the balloon popper game. So we can right click, create scene, and this one is going to be called balloon popper, like so. We can then double click on it to open it up. And you should see here in the hierarchy, we have the little scene icon and it says balloon popper. Okay, so we're inside of the scene now. Now let's set up the main sort of mechanic of our game, which is going to be clicking on the balloons in order to pop them. So how do we create our balloon game object? Well, for this, what we're going to do is we are going to just go into our hierarchy here. We're going to right click and go down to 3D object sphere. Okay. We're just going to keep it nice and simple. We're just going to have a sphere as our balloon. And of course, let's give this a name of balloon. There we go. Now over here in the scene view, we can of course move our camera around and get closer to our ball. Or we can press F to focus in on it automatically like so. Make sure that over here in the inspector, your position is at 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, and 0 on the Z. And if you click over into the game view tab, you should see that the balloon is nice and centered on the screen, okay? So now what we can do is let's give it a material, because right now we just have this plain white balloon and, it doesn't really pop. Balloons generally have colors. So down here inside of the project browser, I'm going to right click, create, go material, and this one is going to be called, we'll call this one red balloon. Okay. We'll go over to the scene view here. Let's drag this red balloon material onto our sphere, like so. Now, nothing's changed, and the reason why is because if we click on our material, over in the inspector, we can modify the properties, okay? What sort of material is this going to be? So over here, what we want to do is change the color. Now, to do that, we need to go over to the albedo, which is basically the base color of the material. And you'll see to the right of it, we have this little color selection box. Okay, we're going to click on that, and then this window will appear where we can select a color. Okay, just your standard color picker that you've probably seen in other pieces of software before. So we can go over here, we can get a nice reddish color like that. There we go. Look in the game view, and there we go. We now have our red balloon. And we can also modify other properties, such as the smoothness, which is at 0.5 right now. And you can see that the smoother I make it, the more sort of reflective the balloon is, okay? Or we can bring it all the way down to make it a nice sort of matte colored red. Or all the way to 1 to make it a reflective sort of surface. Now, balloons aren't too reflective, although they are kind of, so I'm just going to set smoothness to be 0.5, okay? Just the default, and there we go. Now, as a bit of a challenge, I want you to go ahead and duplicate this balloon, so let's go ahead and do that right now real quick. Okay, so I'll just move this over. Control D or Command D on a Mac, drag it over here, do that again, and look in the game view. Make sure that you can see them on the on the same row here. You might need to move them around a bit in order to get that perspective right. And what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and create a material for a blue balloon and a green balloon material. Okay, so create those two new materials and apply them to the other balloons right here. So I'll be right back to see how you're done. Okay, so I hope you had a go at that. Pretty much what we need to do is go back down to our project browser, and I'm going to right click, go create, material, and I'm going to call this one blue balloon. Okay, scene view, drag that onto the middle one here, and I'm going to set the albedo for this one to be a bluish color, something like this. There we go. And then finally for the last one, we need to create a material, call this one green balloon, assign that to the other balloon at the end here, set that color to be green. And there we go. So now we have our 3 different balloons of 3 different colors. Now in the next lesson, what we're going to do is set up our balloon script so we can finally start clicking on them to make them bigger, and then once they reach a certain size, they will pop. And then alongside that, we're also going to have another script which manages our score, okay? So each time we pop a balloon, a certain number will be added to our score, and then eventually we'll have some text on screen displaying that score. So I'll see you all then in the next lesson. Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we are going to continue on with our balloon popper game by adding in a balloon script which is going to be able to detect clicks and increase the size of the balloon. Once it reaches a certain size, it will then pop and add score, which we can then have displayed on screen. So to do this, let's start off by going down to our project browser here. I'm going to right click, go create C# script. Let's call this one balloon. And what I'm going to do is, over in our scene view, let's select all 3 of our balloons here. So hold down shift and click on each of those to select all of them. You should see here in the hierarchy. And I'm going to drag on the balloon script right here to the inspector to add it as a component. So each balloon now has the balloon script component. We can then go ahead and double click on this balloon script here to open it up inside of Visual Studio. Okay, so here we are inside of our balloon script. Now let's have a look at the different things that are already here by default. First of all, at the top of the screen, you'll see we have these using things, great, okay? Using system.collections, using Unity Engine. Basically, these are all of the libraries that we are accessing, and a C# library is basically a bunch of code that we can implement in order to do certain things. For example, using Unity Engine allows us to access a lot of the Unity related functions. And then over here we have public class balloon. Public class is basically defining this as a class balloon, which is the class name. And you'll see here we then have a colon mono behavior. And this here is basically which class we are inheriting from. So which class are we inheriting variables and functions from? And that is mono behavior. And mono behavior is a class which basically allows us to connect this script as a component, allows us to attach it to a game object. And then down here inside of the class, we have 2 functions already set up for us. The start function right here gets called at the start of the game before the first frame, and update gets called every frame. Now for this balloon script, we don't want to do any of these, okay? So let's select both the start and update functions and just delete them. And now what we want to do is instead we want to create a function called void on mouse down, okay? And on mouse down is a function that is built into Unity, okay? It's built into mono behavior right here. And you want to make sure that it is spelt correctly, okay? On mouse down, capital letter for each word. And you'll see here that it is being highlighted in blue. And on mouse down, if you hover over, you'll see here that it says on mouse down is called when the user has pressed the mouse button while over the GUI element or collider. So when our mouse is over this object's collider and we left click, this function gets called. Okay, so what we want to do on here is basically increase the size of the balloon and then pop it when it's ready to pop. So how do we know how much score we want to give, how big we want to make the balloon, and how many pops we need to click? Well, for that, we are going to be creating some variables. Okay, and variables are basically pieces of data that we can assign to a class, and it can hold information. So here I'm going to go public int for score to give, and we'll give it a default value of 1. So basically what we're doing here is we are defining the scope of the variable. Public basically means it can be accessed inside and out of this class, and it's also being displayed inside of the inspector, so we can modify it there on the component. Int is defining the data type, which is of type integer, so a whole number. We then give it a name, and then optionally we can assign a default value, which we have done here with 1. The next variable is going to be a public int for clicks to pop, and we'll set that to be 5 by default. Clicks to pop is basically how many times we need to click on the balloon to pop it. Okay, score to give is how much score we are going to add, and clicks to pop is how many times we need to click on the balloon. And then what we need to do is we need to create a public float scale increase per click, and I'll set this by default to be 0.1. Now, float is a floating point number, so that basically means a number with a decimal. We're calling this one scale increase per click. This is how much we're going to increase the balloon's scale by each time we click on it, so it gets bigger and bigger. And the default value is 0.1. Okay, so we're increasing it by 0.1 each time we click on the balloon, and this F at the end just defines this number as a float. Okay, so whenever you want to write down a float, you do need to put an F behind it. Now, what we can do is go down here to on mouse down, and first of all, we click on the balloon. Let's subtract 1 from clicks to pop. Okay, so to do that, we can go clicks to pop minus equals 1. Okay, so we are subtracting 1 from clicks to pop. Then what we need to do is increase the scale of the balloon. Now, to increase the scale of the balloon, we need to access this object's scale property. Okay, so if I save this script real quick and return to Unity, let's go over here and click on a balloon. You'll notice that the component has all the properties here, so we can modify them if we wish. But the property we want to modify is scale right here, okay? So we have X, Y, Z on the scale, and you can see how when I increase the scale along the X, the Y, and the Z, it basically makes the object larger. So to do that, we need to access the transform component. So for this, we can go transform.local scale, which is the property that modifies the scale. And then we want to go plus equals vector3.1 multiplied by scale increase per click. Now, a vector3 is basically a piece of data that contains an X, Y, and Z value. And vector3.1 is a sort of preset vector which has 1 for the X, 1 for the Y, and 1 for the Z. So if we multiply that by scale increase per click, we're basically increasing our X, Y, and Z scale by 0.1. Okay, so that's what this line of code here does. We're increasing our scale by this much right here each time we click. So let's save this script, return to Unity, and test it out. So let's press play, and if we click on a balloon, you should see, there we go. I'm clicking on it, and we can make it as pretty much as big as we want. If we stop playing and we click on the balloon, let's change the scale increase per click from 0.1 to 0.5. Let's make it a bit bigger. We'll press play. And now if I click on it, you'll see that it is increasing at a much larger scale here. And if we look over at the top right corner, you'll see the scale variable here is at 5 right now. I click on it, 5.5, 6, 6.5, and it keeps on getting bigger. But there is a problem, and that is that we can keep on clicking on this balloon forever, and it's not popping. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scale increase per click back to 0.1. And in the next lesson, we are going to be working on actually popping this balloon and adding our score. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then in the next lesson. Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to continue on with our balloon popper minigame. So what we're going to do now is start working on being able to pop our balloon and add score to it. So to do that, what we're going to do is we are going to first of all go down to our project browser, and we are going to create a brand new script. And this one is going to be called Score Manager. Okay, just like so. So with our score manager, we need to attach it to a game object in our game. So to do that, I'm going to right click in our hierarchy, and I'm going to create empty. And what create empty does is basically creates a game object with no components. And I'm going to call this one Score Manager. Now, if you have scripts that aren't really modifying the position or modifying anything attached to that game object, then generally it's good to attach it to an empty game object to act as sort of a container for management scripts. So there we go. Then what we can do is open up our score manager inside of Visual Studio. And this score manager script, we can delete these start and update functions since we won't be needing those just yet. What we're going to do is we are going to create a variable. And this variable is going to be a public int for our score. Now, this is going to be the variable which keeps track of our total score. So whenever we pop a balloon, this is going to increase. So how do we increase the score? Well, for that, what we're going to do is we are going to be calling a function on the score manager. So if we go to a new line, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function called increase score. And it's going to have a parameter. So it's going to have an input into the function where we can send data into it. And it's going to be of type integer, and it's going to be called amount. So all we want to do inside of this function is just go score plus equals amount. So when this function right here is called, we're going to be sending over an amount, and that amount is going to be added to our score variable right here. Now, where and how do we call this increase score function? Well, in order to call it outside of the script from the balloon script right here, we need to make this variable public, or we need to make this function public, And to do that, it's the exact same way as making a public variable. We just need to add the keyword public behind it. Now, if we weren't doing that, and if we just had void, then that means it is a private function. And a private function can only be called within the script or within the class that it was created. So we won't even know that this function exists over here in the balloon script unless we make it public. Okay? So now what we can do is go over to our balloon script, and we need a way of calling that function. So how do we do that? Well, in order to do that, we first of all need to have a reference to the score manager component. And to do that, let's create a new variable here. It's going to be public score manager, and we'll call it score manager. Okay, so the type of variable is going to be this score manager component, okay, or the score manager script right here. So if we save this script, go back into Unity, what you'll see is if we select on one of our balloons, you'll see over here that on our balloon script, we have a score manager property, and what we can then do is drag in our score manager game object. It's going to assign that component to that property right here. Let's do the same for our other balloons. Drag in the score manager like so, because on our score manager game object, we of course have the score manager component, okay, right here. So now what we can do is inside of our balloon script, we can check to see if our clicks to pop is equal to 0. Okay, so here, I'm going to, at the bottom of this function, I'm going to go if clicks to pop equals 0. So if the clicks to pop is equal to 0, then we are going to increase the score. So to do this, we can go score manager dot increase score. You can see here we can access that function, and we're going to be sending over the amount, and the amount is going to be score to give. Okay, this variable right here. And then finally, once we pop the balloon, we want to of course destroy it. So to destroy an object inside of Unity, we can just call the word or call the function destroy. All right, sending over the game object we want to destroy, which is going to be game object. Make sure it is a lowercase g, capital O, and this word right here basically refers to this game object, okay? The game object that this script is attached to. So we can save that, we can return to Unity, and what we're going to do is we're going to select our score manager and keep an eye on this score property right here, okay? Let's see if it goes up. So I'm going to press play, and let's click on the red balloon. You can see once it popped, it got destroyed, and score is now equal to 1. Let's do the blue one. There we go, score is now equal to 2, and for the green, score is now equal to 3. Okay, so you can see it is increasing right here, which is pretty good. Now on our balloons, we can of course change the score to give property. So on the blue balloon, let's set this maybe to, we'll go 2. And on the green balloon, we'll set it to be 3. So the red balloon gives us 1 score, blue gives us 2, and green gives us 3. So if we select our score manager again, and if we pop the red balloon, there we go, score has been increased by 1. Click on the blue balloon, There we go, score has been increased by 2, and finally, once we pop this green balloon, our score should be equal to 6, okay? 3 plus 3 is 6. And there we go. Our score is increased by 3 again. So yeah, that is how we can pop our balloons and also communicate with other scripts inside of Unity, okay? Because once it comes down to actually creating games and creating all these interacting systems, you will be having different components, different scripts communicating with each other, okay? And this is just an example on how to do that. We have our balloon script, which is communicating to our score manager when it gets popped, and it's calling a function on the score manager when it gets popped. Okay, so in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we are going to be looking at Unity's UI system, and we are going to be setting up some text here to be displayed on top of the screen, okay? And that is going to be our score text. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then in the next lesson. Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at Unity's UI system in order to create some text on top of our screen. So what we're going to do first of all is let's hop over into our scene view right here, okay? And we need to create something known as a canvas. Now, a canvas is basically going to be the container which holds all of our UI elements. And the canvas can change size based on your screen's resolution and aspect ratio, thus having the elements inside of it react based on that. So what we're going to do is in our hierarchy, let's right click and we want to go down to UI, and then you see here there's a lot of different UI components we can choose from, but we're going to go down to canvas, okay? And as you can see, it's created 2 new game objects. It's created a canvas, which if we look over here, you can see it is very, very large. And it's also created an event system. Now, an event system is basically a component which allows us to interact with UI objects. So if we click on a button, if we drag a slider, this is basically going to be in charge of that. So it's good to have an event system here, and luckily it gets created automatically for us, so we don't need to touch any of this. Now let's select our canvas right here, and you'll see over here on the right hand side, we have a number of different components. Now, first of all, you may notice that our transform component is missing, or more so, our transform component has been changed to something known as a rect transform right here. Now, a rect transform is basically the replacement for a transform component that each UI object has, okay? So our buttons, our text, any sort of UI element you want to add to a canvas will have a rect transform component. Now, this is different to a normal transform component. You'll see here that it does have position, X, Y, Z, it has scale, it has rotation, but it also has width, height, pivot, and anchors. Okay, the width and the height, that's pretty self-explanatory, basically how wide and how high in terms of pixels is this UI element. Anchors and pivot, we'll get to that in just a second. So we have our canvas right here. Now to get in a bit of a better position for working with it, what I'm going to do is go over to the top left corner of the scene view, and you'll see here there is a button that says 2D. I'm going to click on that 2D button right now, and you'll see it turns us into this 2D mode. So we can zoom out, we can hold right mouse to pan around, but I'm going to click on our canvas and press F. And as you can see, we have now focused on our canvas right here. So we can zoom into it, but there's nothing on our canvas just yet, so nothing really to modify here. So let's add in some text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the canvas game object in the hierarchy, and I'm going to go down to UI text-text mesh pro. Okay, you see there is one that says text, but we don't want to do that. We want to go down to text-text mesh pro and click on that. Now this window is going to pop up. You just want to click on the import TMP essentials. Now, TextMesh Pro is basically a package that comes with Unity. It used to be a third-party asset that you could download from the asset store, but in recent years, Unity has sort of integrated it within the engine itself, so it's now part of Unity. And TextMesh Pro is basically a really good way of displaying text in games. Rather than having a text being made up of a bunch of pixels, it's instead made up of a mesh, which allows us to get really fine and crisp text. Okay, but we don't need to worry about all that. We can then exit out of the TMP importer window right here, and you'll see in the middle of the screen we have our text element. Okay, you see it has the rect transform component, it has a canvas renderer component, which is basically there to render on the canvas, and it has a text mesh pro -text component, which has all the different properties that we can modify. So if we zoom into this text here, you'll see a number of things. First of all, we don't have the XYZ move gizmo ready to move it around. Rather, we have this new tool, which is the rect tool up here at the top left. Okay, of course, we can switch to all the old ones. We have the move tool that we know here, but the rect tool allows us to modify the width and the height of this object. So we can just click and drag on this object here to move it around our canvas. And you can see here that if we bring it to one of the edges, it'll snap into place. So finally adjusting things and snapping together is really good with Unity's UI system. You can even see it snaps directly into the middle as well, along the horizontal and vertical axes too. And these blue circles on the four corners allow us to click and drag to resize this element. Okay, so if we want a larger text area, we can of course make it bigger. We can also click and drag on the sides here. You don't want to click and drag on these little white cubes though, as they do increase and decrease sort of the margins. So we don't really want to modify those. Rather, we just want to click and drag on the vertical lines and horizontal lines. Okay, so I'm going to make a text box about this big, I'd say. We can then drag this to the top of the screen since that's where we want our text to be displayed. Okay, there we go. And if we look into our game view now, you'll see here that the text is being displayed on screen. Okay, so let's get to actually creating our text. I'm going to first of all rename this game object to be score text. Okay, and then let's give it some placeholder text to just display. So down here where it has new text, we can rename this, or we can change what is being displayed. So what's going to be displayed is just going to be score, we'll put a colon, and then we'll just have an example of, let's just say 500. Okay, there we go in the game view. Then we can modify the properties down here. There are a large number of different text properties inside of Unity. We can make it bold, we can make it italic, underline, all these different things here. We can increase and decrease the font size. So let's maybe increase the font size to about 40, or make it bold. We can change the vertex color, which is just the color of the text. Let's make that a sort of darkish color like so. If you look in the game view, that's what it looks like. Okay, we can also set the alignment. So down here, we can align it to the left by default, the middle, the right. I'm going to align it to the middle, and then we can also do the same vertically. Okay, top, middle, bottom. I'm going to align it to the middle. Okay, so now the text is centered within this, within the bounds of its object. Okay, there we go. We don't really need to worry about any of the other things down here. These are more material related aspects. But what we can then do is look at the anchoring. Now the anchoring is what allows us to have dynamic UI that changes based on the resolution of the screen. So if we go into the game view right now and we sort of undock the game window, okay, just drag it out, you'll notice that if I resize the game view, you'll see that the score text is sort of staying in place, okay? It's not moving with the screen. But what we want to do is sort of attach it to the top of the screen. So when we make the screen really small like this, the score text is just underneath the top of the screen. And when we make it really tall, we also want the score text to be there as well. We don't want the score text to sort of sit in place like it is right now. Okay, and the reason why is if we dock this back, the anchoring is set to center. So as you can see right here, we've got this little thing inside the rect transform. If we click on it, you'll see the anchoring is set to middle center. This basically means that the object is going to remain at this specific distance in terms of pixels from the center of the screen. But what we want to do is set the anchoring to be at the top center. So to do that, we can select the anchor gizmo here and just set it to be top center. And you can see that the four little anchor arrows have also moved to the top center of the screen here. So now we can undock the game window, and if we resize it, you can see that the score is remaining at the top of the screen. If we make it very tall, if we make it very squat like this, you can see that it is still remaining on screen at all times. That is because it's basically attached to the top of the screen, and it is always going to remain a specific pixel offset from the top. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to look at actually implementing this text into our score manager and being able to modify it inside of the script. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then in the next lesson. Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be connecting our score text right here to our score manager script. So let's open up the score manager right here inside of Visual Studio. And first things first, we need to create a variable that references the text component, okay? If we want to actually access it and modify what it is being displayed, we need to access the text component. Now to do this, we first of all need to go to the top of the screen here, and we need to be adding in using TM Pro like so. Okay, TM Pro is basically Text Mesh Pro's library, which allows us to access the different classes that we need. Okay, so down here then, inside of the score manager, let's create a new variable. This is going to be called public, and it's going to be of type text mesh pro UGUI. Okay, it's a pretty long data type here, or pretty long class. And I'm going to call this one score text. Okay, just like so. Now, as well as this, we need to also create a function which updates the score text to display the current score. So to do that, we can go void update score text, and inside of this function what we're going to do is go score text dot text. Okay, the dot text is the property which allows us to modify what gets displayed, and this is just going to be equal to, and I'm going to make a string here, so we're going to go score colon, I'm going to put a space, and then we can combine this string with a number, so we can combine it together by going plus score. Okay, and what this will do is basically have the text display score, colon, a space, and then however much score we have. Now, this update score text function does not need to be public due to the fact that we are only going to be calling it within this class here. So where are we going to be calling update score text? Well, first of all, we want to call this function whenever we update our score. Whenever we increase our score, we want to call it. So after we add the amount to our score, we want to call update score text. And then we also want to call it at the start of the game, okay? Because right now we have the placeholder 500 on our score text. We of course want to set that to 0 at the start of the game. So up here, I'm going to create the void start function, okay? Which gets called once right at the start of the game. And inside of here, we just want to call update score text, okay? Just like that. And this should be all the code necessary in order to update our score text when we increase our score, as well as at the start of the game. So back inside of Unity, what we're going to do is go over to our score manager object right here. And on our score manager object, you'll see here, of course, we have the score text component. We can drag that in. There we go. Press play, and we should see that score is 0. Now, if we pop some balloons, there we go, 1, 3, and we should then see 6. And there we go. So you can see the score text is being updated, so it's working just fine. Now from here, pretty much what you can do is go ahead and duplicate a bunch of these balloons, start placing them around the screen. Also, if you wish, you can create new materials. You can set, different types of balloons which have different amounts of clicks required to pop them, different amounts of score they give, different scale increases as you click on them. So yeah, good luck with that. And throughout this project, we pretty much looked at working with multiple scripts and being able to communicate between them. So we have our balloon script and our score manager. The score manager contained the variable for our score, and whenever our balloon popped, we were basically telling the score manager to increase the score by a certain amount. And then we also looked at Unity's UI system. We looked at quite just the basics of it, with just having a little bit of text on top of our screen. But if you right click on canvas, go UI, you can see there is definitely a large number of different components. There's input fields, drop downs, sliders, buttons, etc. So do feel free to start experimenting with those and connecting those up, as well, as they can be very useful in your games. So thanks for watching.